I want to take us into the future and to imagine a scenario. So if you will travel with me, I want us to imagine that this meeting today is being held on the 13th of November. The year is 2015. And we're going to look back together on how the internet has evolved over the last decade, and we're going to look forward as to where we think it's going to go. Are you happy for me to do that? Now, you may think this is the quickest way for me to lose my reputation, because Bill Gates himself says he can't see the internet more than 36 months. Eric Schmidt says he thinks about 24 months is his limit. And yet we know that both those organizations have taken huge multi-billion-dollar bets, in fact, for the longer term. And it's interesting. I mean, I look back to a book I wrote in 1998 and consulting documents that I wrote then, and you would be the same. And the fundamentals of what we saw then, of course, led to the dot-com boom, because our world agreed with us that our world would be changed. What they got wrong about was the share price, because that was not our job. Our job was not to predict the share price of Amazon. Our job was to warn people about fundamental changes in every aspect of society. I have to say that if you go back to the things that this community said then, they have turned out to be remarkably accurate. So I think we can have some confidence as we look forward 7 years. So can I make that jump? Are you happy for me to do that? But please don't say this is a prediction. It's not. Okay. It's a piece of fun with a serious content. Okay, so let's go. It's interesting to look back, and 30 years. Just 30 years ago, I mean, yesterday morning, Google announced that they were raising the free email capacity for each of us to 100 gigabytes. What is interesting is to go back 30 years. When I had my first IT startup company in 1978, just around that sort of time, for me to have delivered to my clients that amount of free capacity would have cost me 800 million euros each. That, my friends, is the power of what we're talking about when we go forward another 10. Because, of course, it's increasing exponentially. And therefore, it's no surprise that within the next 12 months, we think we have two companies that are in a race against time to launch the world's first camera with a resolution similar to the human eye. Now, that's a lot of hype, and maybe we can't even use that resolution usefully on any screen. But the fact that we're even considering it is extraordinary. Considering that you can only process 112K of bandwidth in your ears as you listen to me, but your eyes as you watch me are processing 3 terabits of data every second. And that, my friends, is a clue to where the internet is going. Of course, we're all talking these days about the M-Cloud. The fact that even the smallest device has almost infinite computer power because it's accessing everything everywhere. And the killer application for it, as we know, is speech recognition, because it means that even in something the size of 1 centimeter square inside your ear, you are able to process the fastest and most sophisticated speech recognition system in the whole world, because of course the sound goes online, it's processed, it's sent to your email account, and so on. And it's just the start of the M-Cloud phenomenon. It's also the beginning of the more controversial area of the so-called B-mail. What is B-mail? Of course, it's text to brain. What does it mean? Well, it's a whole range of new biodigital machines that we've seen connected to the internet. There's nothing new about that. We had the first experimental ones in 1995. You'll remember we all wrote about it then. In 2000 we had the first working biodigital brains, and by 2010, of course, they were quite common in research institutions. And as a physician, of course, let me remind you how it works. You take some brain cells, either human brain cells or anyone's brain cells, actually, animal brain cells. You mix them in solution with a chip, and you allow the solution to settle. After an hour, the brain cells have coated the chip with a membrane which starts to grow. And you put that membrane in a culture to grow for 2 or 3 days. And you know, of course, what happens. These brain cells get caught on the matrix, and they start to grow out feelers towards each other. And when they detect each other, this isn't science fiction. This was done in 1994, 95, 96. I'm telling you history there. But these brain cells touch each other. When they find another brain cell, they develop more bandwidth. That's what brain cells do. They are programmed to do that. So you land up with big pipes between brain cells, or clusters of them. But brain cells also grow into the surface of chips, as you know, and when they detect electrical activity, they also form new synapses. So we had biodigital surfaces for some time, and what's interesting about them is where they're going to go. Because as I'm talking now, some of you are reacting, not logically, but emotionally. And we begin to understand that the most important thing that will drive the next phase of the future in terms of the internet bandwidth is not technology, it's not innovation, it's emotion. Let me explain why. The fact of the matter is that there is as we know, one technology. By the way, emotions are the reason why biodigital brains will never make it out of the laboratory. There aren't many people in this room. Put your hands up if you would like a chip implanted into your brain. The answer is very few. Well, one or two, but you're not a representative group, my friends. But most people do not. But there's one thing that most people do want, and of course it's going to be the dominant feature of all internet activity worldwide in terms of bandwidth, and that's video. By 2010, YouTube was already responsible single-handedly for 15% of all bandwidth in the European Union. That was up from 10% in 2008. It's been stable since then. Why? Because of other competitors that have come online. But the fact of the matter is that YouTube was about do-it-yourself TV, and YouTube was already by 2008 and is still in 2015 the largest TV station in the whole world, and it is more trusted than any other broadcaster. And what we've discovered is that people will listen to the opinion of a stranger online on a video clip, and they will have more authority than President Obama, President Putin, or the President of the European Union. Now, it's the competitors of video that have driven the real demand, and of course it's video on demand that's been doing it. Now, there's nothing new about that in a sense. You and I predicted that back in 2000. We had done the maths. We knew that a single person watching high digital TV would consume 1 gigabyte of bandwidth per hour. That's a lot. And when you did that up, you realized that one single 2-hour video is the equivalent to you sending 200,000 emails. And that is why, by 2011, 95% of the entire bandwidth of the European Union, the United States, and bandwidth between those two areas was, of course, video on demand. And while you and I thought that it was going to be primarily video downloaded for viewing later, because of the emotional connection of downloading and watching instantaneously, pressing and watching, we were totally wrong. In fact, it turns out that 95% of all this traffic is watched in real time. It's not encoded and stored. Now look at this, just to remind you back to the olden days of 2008. I just want to take you back to the Olympics in China. Just in that day, 8 million people in the United States watched the opening ceremony live online from a single website on NBC. By the London Olympics in 2012, that figure had gone up to 20 million. 20 million Americans watching on the single NBC site. I'm not talking about the other 1 million that watched it on their mobile phones. This was the beginning of a stampede into, as you want to watch it, one click and play video. And as I say, it has continued to drive and tax just about every part of the system and put it under huge strain. So what are we looking at for next year? We're looking at bandwidth that's up from the 2008 figure of around 82 terabits per second up to at least 250. But I have to say we have no confidence about this figure, and I could be out by a factor of 2 or 3 because of the speed to which it's growing at the moment. Most of us looking at these graphs are, because it's not just the number of people watching video, it's the definition in which they are doing so. If you look at 250 terabits per second for next year, all that is 250 million people watching a video clip at the same moment worldwide. And that doesn't include any other bandwidth in the internet system whatsoever. So that's why you can see the challenge. And it's an energy challenge too. And I expect the European Union to pass new legislation in the next 12 months, by the end of 2016, requiring major changes in server technology. Look at this. At the moment, by 2010, we were already using 1.3 trillion kilowatt hours per year of heat simply to power the web. By 2015 it had leapt to 2.7 trillion kilowatt hours. That's a big number. Let me explain it.